Welcome to this ONS Energy Talks. Our guest today entered the position as Minister of Petroleum and Energy in Norway in January this year. Welcome, Tina Bru.
Thank you so much.
So, since you took over the position as minister earlier this year, the world has literally been turned upside down. So, first and foremost, how are things with you these days?
Well, things with me personally are good, but of course, this whole situation, as you said, has really turned everything upside down. And taking on this job has become something very different than what I thought it would be when I started in January. But then again, I wake up every morning feeling extra motivated because I know everything I do now is so super important. To try to save as many jobs as possible, to try to bring the country through this very, very extraordinary situation, and handling what is ultimately a big health crisis, of course. So I'm very motivated, but of course I'm not traveling. I'm not doing any of those regular things that a minister usually does. So it's different than what I thought, but I'm still enjoying the work.
That's very good to hear, Tina. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that's happened since January, February this year, and one of the kind of the biggest changes, I think, for the oil and gas or the energy industry is that the oil price has literally plunged since March this year, sending the entire oil and gas industry into rough waters, very rough waters. And this has resulted in the market being flooded by oil, resulting in historical production cuts also for the Norwegian continental shelf. So can you explain for the listeners, how can production cuts help oil and gas industry? It kind of probably sounds a bit paradoxical for some people.
Well, I think we have to kind of maybe start at the beginning because like you mentioned, what's happened to the oil price. You know, the oil industry has been hit by what some people have described as a perfect storm, where you on the one side have this big drop in demand because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then you've also had this really increase in production amongst the big oil producing countries. And when that whole agreement between the OPEC plus countries just didn't continue, that of course made the situation worse. And then what Norway has said is that in a situation where a big group of producers were to agree to cut their production, we would also consider doing a unilateral cuts here in Norway in our production. And the reason this works is that when there is a really big surplus of oil in the market, of course, the price is driven extremely low. We're now in a situation where we're seeing the big bulks of storage and storage on oil are beginning to fill up. So to help the market stabilize, you can contribute by cutting production. So Norway has decided to cut some of its production out of, we're thinking about our own economy and our own resource management, and that's the basis for the cuts here in Norway. But it was a precondition that the big producers also came with cuts for us to even consider doing it. And then that happened, and then we also made cuts afterwards.
And when will this start happening? What's going to be happening now?
Well, it's starting in June. So we're doing cuts all throughout the year. We're ending this deregulation by the end of the year. So it's a combination of some fields that have just been pushed in time because of the situation. So their production will not come online per se as planned. And then we're also distributing cuts in a fair and even way on all our production fields to also bring down our total production. So we're going to be at about 3,000 barrels less per day in December this year than we would have been without production cuts. So it's a substantial amount, but it's also an amount that we feel is right regarding our own economy and our own resource management.
So there's a lot of analysis out there about how the situation will impact activity, and one analysis from Rystad Energy has predicted that investments on the Norwegian continental shelf will be nearly halved onwards till 2022 with this situation going on. And to prevent this from happening, the industry itself has suggested new tax methods to stimulate activities in the short run. And while the industry has their measures, the government has met the suggestion with your own package of tax measures. But at the same time, we can read all over Norwegian news that the government suggestions is not welcomed by the industry. So again, can you explain how your measures differ from the industry's measures, and why these two parties don't agree on which measures that works the best?
Well, first off, I think that's kind of normal in the political sphere, that of course people have suggestions, organizations have suggestions, and we really listen to also the suggestions from the industry regarding the tax regime. We've made our own assessment. We've produced a proposal that we think is good. Its main focus is to add capital for the companies so that they can still lift projects, because we all know that the main thing that drives activity in Norway and that sustains jobs and makes sure that we have activity on the NCS is, of course, that projects are completed, that you build, that you have contracts out for engineering, for building, for different things. So yes, I know it's not the exact proposal that they have. I see there are discussions around it. Now this proposal is going to come to Parliament. I mean, we are a minority government, so we can't decide on our own, of course. So there will probably be a debate in Parliament, and we'll see what happens in the end.
But why is it that you just can't? Why can't you just give the industry what they ask for, and perhaps, as they say, stimulates activity even further, and perhaps prevents massive unemployment?
Well, we share, of course, the same goal. I mean, we would have never proposed something to not try to meet that same goal. We also want to preserve jobs. We want to make sure projects can go ahead. But of course, we have other considerations to make as well. We have to, I mean, the Norwegian tax regime for oil production has been very cherished over many years. We've prided ourselves on the fact that it's a stable regime. The companies and the industry as well is really, really keen on that. They always cite it as one of the most important things. It's important for us that if we are to make changes, they have to be temporary. They have to be, there has to be a clear reason for doing it, and it has to be kind of shaped in a way that fits that point. But of course, there's always going to be discussions about what is the exact right medicine, and I'm open to discuss. I'm open for discussion. I'm open to having a dialogue. But this is our proposal, and now we'll see what happens when it hits Parliament, and the other political parties as well have to say what they think is the right recipe for success.
Okay, so we're all waiting, very excited. But the industry is also waiting a second package of measures from you and the rest of the government, where you will ensure progress towards Norway's path towards a greener society, like a green package, I believe they call it. Can you say something about what we can expect from this second package?
Well, what we said is that in parallel to doing these temporary changes to the oil taxation regime, we've also said that we want to come with a package that has a greener profile, because we all know that even right now we're really, really focused on saving jobs in this industry, because there's no way you're going to be able to have a green shift without this industry. I mean, you need all these different companies, you need the technology, you need the competencies that exist in this industry to bridge over to other kinds of industries and more green jobs, for example. So it's trying to find that combination where you, on the one side, have activity on the NCS that is core activity, oil and gas, but then also come with government money to try to accelerate maybe technologies that aren't commercially viable per today on their own, but can be so in the future. So basically what we said is that we're going to spend more money on Enova, which is our big, like, main funder of many of these technology things that we want to focus on. I mean, Enova is what has financed big parts of the Hywind Tampen offshore wind project. So that's an example. We're also talking about hydrogen and also maritime industries for green technology. So there's a combination of things. It's not all of it's not public yet, but it's in that direction.
And we will be looking forward to that in the end of May. Yeah,
that's right.
So it's a little bit of a follow-up question from the same theme as well. But the government is seeking. You previously said that you're seeking to make Norwegian economy less dependent on oil and gas. while we see a tax package stimulating activity for future existence of oil and gas industry. Can you explain how this is kind of interlinked?
Well, it's kind of what I was saying in the previous question. I think that you need this industry to have a successful green transition. It's on the shoulders of this industry you're going to build new industry. I mean, there won't be any offshore wind power unless you have some of the technologies and the companies that are used to operating on the NCS, that have that kind of competency. They need to lift these kinds of projects. Same goes for hydrogen. Same goes for carbon capture and storage, for example. All these are examples of greener industries that aren't commercially viable on their own per today. But we need our biggest industry, the oil and gas industry, to help lift and realize those kinds of projects. And we're not going to be able to do that if we lose a lot of these companies now because of the COVID-19 pandemic and this really extraordinary situation. So we need to find a way to save as many jobs as possible so that we can continue the transition. I'm not a believer in a crash landing. I think this is something that needs to happen over time. And that's the only way to bring with us this important industry, and also the jobs and all the people that are involved. And I think that's the recipe for the future.
And you also been previously quoted saying that you fear that green projects will be the loser in this crisis that the energy industry is now facing. I guess this second package, or maybe perhaps both packages, can be a part of preventing this crash landing, as you said, that you can keep pressure on energy transition.
Definitely, and I think we have to see the two things together. One of the big reasons that we also wanted to meet the industry with regard to them wishing changes in the tax regime was, of course, to make sure that they can still lift some of the greener projects on the NCS, like electrification projects. Mainly, these are projects that we know already have really, they're marginally profitable. They're not the big drivers for the investments. So to make sure that you still have both the will and the capability to lift those projects is really important. So we try to rig the system in a way that we can still preserve that and not have those be pushed back in time, because the companies are now in a really pressed situation, of course, because of the drop in the oil price and everything else that's going on in the industry. So we're trying to do many things at once, but the bottom line is it's all about saving jobs. It's all about making sure that we get through this whole crisis situation without losing both jobs and companies on the way. And that's the main driver for all the proposals that we're making.
And the skills as well, I guess, from oil and gas industry in the transition.
Definitely.
So my final question, Tina, I know you're a busy lady. I just wanted to ask you, if we think aloud, looking into the crystal ball, how long do you think this crisis will last? And what do you think will be our biggest learning from it?
Well, I really wish that I could see into the future and know how long this will last. I think it's hard to say, but I think we just have to be prepared that it's going to take a while. How quickly the oil price, for example, bounces back will, of course, depend on whether the production cuts globally are successful, whether the agreement is kept, and we actually do manage to have a quicker stabilization of the market than we would without the cuts. And the other part is, of course, how long is the world going to be on lockdown? How long are we going to keep not flying, not driving, not doing any of those things that usually drive the oil and gas demand? So it's hard to say, but I think we just have to be prepared kind of to bunker down, because I think this is going to take a while. But we're doing what we can to try to make the transition as smooth as possible and to get through this in a good way. And hopefully we'll see a stabilization of the oil price within the end of the year. That's at least my hope. But I'm not an oil and gas analyst. I don't know, but I'm hoping.
No guessing of the oil price there. And how about your biggest learning? I know it's difficult as we're in the middle of it right now, but so far, can you say something about maybe the biggest surprises you've had so far, learnings?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that, in a normal situation, you would spend probably many months, maybe a year or more to, for example, make a change in the tax regime for the continental shelf. I mean, that's not something that you do quickly. But right now, because of everything that's happening, we're moving so fast. We're coming with proposals so fast. We're working so hard to try to to fix problems, to answer key challenges as quickly as possible. And you have to. I mean, there really is no choice. But I'm really learning how quickly we are able to work, how both different political parties can pull together, even though maybe we argue about a lot all of the time otherwise, but now we're pulling in the same direction. Not least how the government is working. I mean, all the bureaucrats, how all these really competent people are working night and day to get us through this. And it's been really impressive, basically. And also that goes for the companies and how they're turning around to try to get everyone through this and working together. And it impresses me.
I think that's a very good roundup. I think people are working hard. Changes are happening very fast, but we're also working fast to handle the changes faster than we're managing faster than we perhaps did before, and just changing the way we think around things. Thank you so much for contributing to ONS Energy Talks, Tina Bru, and good luck with the rest of your work. And thank you everyone for listening and tuning in.